Kevin Gordon here from Autosavant, coming to you from the 2013 Volkswagen Jetta Hybrid. A lot of times called the Volkswagen Jetta Hybrid Turbo because of their marketing promotions. The reason we're stopped in an underground parking garage, or at least a covered parking garage, is because of the fact that one, it's rainy and miserable today, and two, because it's sort of the best way to demonstrate, of course, the Jetta Hybrid's best party trick, which is we'll turn the car on, stick it right into E mode, which is full electronics mode, and you'll notice that now we can happily pull away your full electric power. So if I turn off the AC, you'll notice it gets to be whisper quiet in here, and you're propelling along under battery power alone. The reason I chose a parking garage to do this is because the Jetta Hybrid's hybrid system is not all that powerful and can't really drive the car up to, say, highway speeds on electricity alone. In standard mode, it's good for in the 20s mile per hour wise, and then if you turn it into E mode, which is a switch which is sort of favors pure economy, it'll get up to about 31 or 32, but you do need to drive it extremely gently to keep it in its electronic mode. So as we get underway here, I want to talk a little bit about what makes up the powertrain of the Jetta Hybrid. In the engine compartment is a 1.4 liter inline 4 that's a turbocharged direct injected little gasoline engine, and that on its own makes 150 horsepower and 184 foot-pounds of torque. Mated to that is a 20 kilowatt electric engine, or 27 horsepower electric engine, that makes about 114 foot-pounds of torque. So you'd think, well, the combined is the addition of those two. Well, it's not. The way they combine them, what you wind up with is 170 horsepower and 184 foot-pounds of torque. So no increase in torque over just the gasoline motor. But what they do is that gasoline motor makes that amount of torque from, I think, 15 or 1800 RPM up to about 3500 RPM. With the addition of the electric motor, it makes it so it makes all of its torque from 1000 RPM, or basically idle, all the way up to 4500 RPM. So they're just using it as a torque supplement. That's connected to a 7-speed dual clutch transmission, which is also a little interesting for hybrid cars. And the result of that is an EPA-rated combined number of 45 miles to the gallon. I think that's 42 in the city and 47 on the highway. So again, it's a pretty interesting setup, because what you wind up getting is gasoline engine, clutch pack, electric motor, clutch pack, 7-speed dual clutch transmission, eventually driving the wheels. So there is a lot going on, and a lot of couplings between the power systems and the pieces that drive the wheels in this car. All in all, it adds up to something that is interesting. You know, it sort of can be sporty-ish, and it can also be very economical. And I think one of the interesting parts of the car is the fact that instead of a tachometer, you get a sort of boost meter power gauge. It's a little bit like a Bugatti Veyron's power reserves indicator, except for nowhere nearly as exciting. The battery part of the Jetta Hybrid is a lithium-ion 60-cell 1.1 kilowatt-hour battery pack. So it's a little bit different than what you'll typically find in, say, a Prius, which are still nickel, hydride sort of battery units that are bigger and heavier. It's a more compact unit, and as a result, in the trunk, there's a hump in the front portion of the trunk that you can see where the batteries live, but you do retain fold-down rear seats. The other thing they're doing, similar to the Volkswagen Beetle we just tested, is instead of using a torsion beam rear suspension, they're putting in, real independent suspension back there just for packaging purposes, more than for sporty dynamics. So it's worth mentioning again that it's a really unique setup. A gasoline turbocharged engine driving a lithium-ion powered battery pack connected to a dual clutch transmission instead of a CVT like you'll find in a lot of other places, or conventional automatic. Well, how does it all work? From a driving perspective, it's fine, but from an economy perspective, we have been very much challenged to meet even the city number of the EPA. And I can tell you that this is one of the cars that I've been the kindest to while I've driven it. I really have worked to try to be easy on the throttle, use the regenerative braking as much as possible, use this fun little, infotainment display about what's going on to try to get it to use battery power, at least battery assistance, as much as possible. With all of that, if we look at the long-term stats on this car, so this is my trip and the person who had the car before me. I don't know how they drove, but what you can see is we're getting an average consumption for 1,175 miles of 34.9. And I can tell you that in the time that I've had it, we've driven it 238 miles, and there hasn't been a single trip that I've taken, so if you let the fuel computer reset itself, a single trip above 40 miles per gallon. Now, that's not great, right? But it's definitely better than I do in a non-hybrid version of a similar car. So, as an example, in the Beetle that we had last week, I saw, realistic numbers in the low 30s, where here we're seeing realistic numbers, of course, over the long range, in the 35 mile per gallon range. I've really been seeing, for my time in the car so far, 36.2 miles to the gallon. How does that all translate into how the Jetta Hybrid drives? Well, on the highway, everything is very transparent when you're using the gas pedal. It does a good job between the dual clutch, 7-speed automatic transmission and the hybrid system and the turbocharger, balancing sort of all those power inputs and being basically transparent from a driving perspective. Where that changes is when you touch the brake pedal, and it's one of those things that almost all hybrids still suffer from, and that's the fact that when you first touch the brake pedal, you get a pretty good grab as it goes to, turn the electric motor to generate electricity, until you actually get to the point the pad is touching the brake caliper and you're getting sort of natural braking. So, at highway speeds, it's a little less noticeable. In city driving, it's more noticeable. And there is sort of a feeling of slight panic in that transition between the regenerative braking and the natural braking when you're coming to a slow stop. So if we come to sort of a crawl, what you find is you're at, regenerative braking, and then there's another sort of mush in the brake pedal as you get to the brake pads and the car actually stops. So one of those things that initial impressions are a bit disconcerting, but as you live with the car and get to know it, it starts to go away and you just become accustomed to it. The other thing that this combination of hybrid transmission systems seems to be a little bit weird about is creeping along in traffic or in a parking lot. So now we're, at a full stop, we're in energy mode. Even if we take it out, what'll wind up happening is if we turn it off, if you sit here, stop long enough, and even leave the car in park, what you'll find is since most of the battery's drained, eventually the gasoline engine will kick back on and start to recharge the batteries even when you're stopped. But if we put it back in drive, and you let it creep along, you get a bit of sort of an elastic pull in stop-and-go traffic. It's definitely not sort of normal that you'd expect with a torque-converting transmission, and it can be a little odd. Now, if you're in a steeper hill, the issue you get is you actually get a little bit of rollback before the electric motor engages and starts to pull you sort of on your way. And as a result, you can find yourself sort of jumping to the gas pedal and spinning the low rolling resistance tires. Like we've seen in a lot of Volkswagen's more modern products, there's no ability to defeat any kind of stability control. which really in this is perfectly fine. But it does make it so that you get sort of a squealy chirp out of the less than sticky tires, and then engagement of traction control systems, and eventually you find yourself on your way. The other thing about the Jetta Hybrid, and I know all of this is sort of what's different about this car compared to other hybrids, is the fact that they haven't gone the sort of fuel saving or weight saving approach, to this car. It's got a real spare tire in the back. Even though it's got the battery pack back there and fold-in rear seats, there's a spare tire, not a compressor and a can of goo. As a result, the Jetta Hybrid comes in at over 3,600 pounds. It's a 300 and some pound adder to the standard Jetta, which means that it's a reasonably heavy car. I mean, you're approaching 2 tons in a little compact sedan. It does have sort of its benefits. It of course must wind up hurting economy, which they've sort of gotten around by adding all the complexity of the hybrid drive system, but it does make for a weighted, sort of heavy feeling ride, and in that they've done a good job. The Jetta does feel good. The steering has sort of the natural weird boosting of an electric system underneath it. Winds up being a little heavy in parking lots and a little light and floaty out on the highway. But ultimately it winds up being composed in here, quiet, the seats are comfortable. It winds up being a very comfortable little mid-size sedan if you ignore all the, signage and signaling that there's wacky electronic stuff going on in here. The rest of the car is a SEL model, and this car, you probably, if you've looked at other reviews of it, have seen the SEL Premium Editions. This is the base SEL Jetta Hybrid, and it comes in with the sticker price with delivery of just over $32,000. With that, you get the RNS 315 navigation system, not the newer stepped up, I believe, 515 system. You get the Fender premium audio system, which is really just a branded Panasonic system, but it's a damn good one. Really, the Fender system that's in the Volkswagens is as good as you're going to get in this class of cars. It's got a lot of bottom end to it. It's powerful. It does have a reasonable ceiling to how much noise it can ultimately produce, but it's really a pretty quality stereo when you get right down to it. The nav system is a few years behind a lot of its competitors at this point, but Bluetooth works great. Bluetooth audio streaming works as well as can be expected. Overall, from an infotainment and sort of luxuries perspective, the other things you end up getting are climate control, heated seats. You get power on the driver's seat in the SEL version. Ultimately, with that enormously long run-on sentence, what you sort of find is you're paying probably about a $3,000 premium if you level this car across its competition in the compact upper scale sedan segment to get to the hybrid components. Now, will the additional efficiency of the hybrid pay itself back? It would take a really, really long time, especially considering what I think is a killer is the fact that this car requires premium gas. Now, will it run on non-premium? Yes, but it is not recommended, and if you do it, it will not make that 150 horsepower and 186 foot-pounds of torque in the gasoline-only engine. So I called a timeout on the last part of the review here because I realized as I wrapped up the Jetta Hybrid, at least in the last time we were shooting video, wasn't really kind of a fair synopsis. And the reason for that is twofold. Is one, it was raining, so it didn't give any of you out there an opportunity to hear the car, hear the engine, sort of the way it runs without any really excessive road noise because of the rain. And two, because I realize a lot of the things I said about the way the Jetta Hybrid drives and runs and everything else might have come across as far less than positive. And on that point, I want to be a little bit more clear to say the following, which is I actually like the car. Despite all of its sort of little quirks and foibles and issues, I actually enjoy it. You know, if you sort of stomp on it, it is a zippy little thing. You know, the combination of the turbo and the hybrid works quite well. And, you know, it's comfortable to be in. It's not a bad little car to drive on a daily basis. I do think for $32,000 it's a little expensive, but it's one of those cars that after you spend a week with it, you're not happy to see it leave. The other little part I wanted to make sure I covered off on was giving all of you the opportunity to see the sort of power reserve meter thing that replaces the tachometer on this car, because it is one of those distinctive and interesting features that Volkswagen's trying. I don't think it's the best in the industry of sort of coaching you to drive effectively, efficiently, whatever you might want to call it, but it's not bad, and it is an interesting sort of first pass at something. So, you know, with our fourth GoPro, you can see, you know, cruise along in the highway here at legal speeds as we always drive. You know, steady state, if you put on cruise control, it goes ahead and at 60 miles an hour pretty much lives in its full eco mode, which means that, you know, with some time, either on slight downhills like we're going now, the electric motor is driving the wheels completely on its own, or as you'll see as we flatten out here and start to pull up, what'll wind up happening is the gas motor will kick back in and start to power the wheels. What's interesting is that little needle, if you get it to go up a little bit higher above that solid blue band, it'll actually start to charge the battery as well as drive the wheels. So in between power situations, it obviously is making enough power with the engine to drive the wheels, and depending on a few other variables, you can get it to charge the battery as well. So again, to wrap up, the 2013 Volkswagen Jetta Hybrid with a turbo, as they've been so quick to point out in all their marketing materials. It's an interesting little car. From a hybrid perspective, I do think there's more engaging prospects out there. You know, the new Fusion Hybrid's a really solid car. The Ultima Hybrid, which sort of gets passed over a lot, it's an interesting choice, and all of them fall right at about this price point, the $32,000 price point, competitively equipped. But in this, you do get a little German feeling, German driving little car, and I think that's actually something to be said. So with that, Kevin Gordon from Autosavant.com. I look forward to talking to you guys soon.